Let's bring in a terrific panel now. Joining me from Brisbane is Sky News contributor Daisy Cousens, and from Melbourne, former Victorian Liberal Party president and power broker Michael Kroger. Thanks for joining us. Michael, I'd like to go to you first about a couple of things. You saw today's release of some of the archive documents, a period through which you lived in influence within the Liberal Party during a pretty close connection to Peter Costello. And John Anderson made the comment today about the bequeathing of eye-watering intergenerational debt. I know you've had a view on that. It must have brought back a couple of memories to you. I want to tease a bit out from you. Do you think the government has become so consumed by COVID management that it's lost its reform zeal? Wearing your dollar sweets hat, it ran at the first whiff of grape shot on IR reform. And secondly, what is the path forward for the Australian economy?
You've been around too long, Kate. If you remember dollar sweets, that was over 30 years ago, my friend. But
my word, and you won.
We won, yeah. Look, they're actually great questions. Industrial relations reform is always going to be difficult, and I think we've reached a point where the reconstructed no worse off test has to be the benchmark. We found that in 2007 to our great disappointment. Even though the no disadvantage test was put back by John Howard before the election, the Labor Party of the Union still said that work choices was, killing wages and et cetera, et cetera. So I think, and Christian Porter's recent changes, which were very moderate but blown out of all proportion by the unions and Labor, I think we have reached a position where we're going to have to proceed on the basis of there's no disadvantage. But there are huge amounts of changes large numbers of changes that can be made in relation to industrial relations, and one of them, of course, is the whole freeing up of workers in the gig economy to free them from strictures of being deemed to be employees when in fact they are contractors. In relation to the second point, in relation to intergenerational debt, look, John Anderson makes an excellent point, as you'd expect from him. I mean, the Kennett government came into power with $33 billion of debt and paid it down to $3 billion, which was a phenomenal effort. The Howard Costello government paid off the debt. In this era, at this time, we've never seen anything like we're seeing now. And that's why Frydenberg, who checked with Howard before they made the announcements and policy decisions, of course, as you know, we've never seen anything like this, and hopefully we'll never see it again. And the government decided we're going to save 700,000 jobs and the livelihood of Australians, and that's what they did. And in the end, I think they did the right thing. There is intergenerational debt, of course. We'll be paying it off for generations, but in the end, I think they did the right thing.
Well, I guess we've kept a pulse in the economy at least, but Daisy, your generation's the one that's going to inherit this, but I'd like to throw to you on the issue of the day, really. What do you make of the changes to the first verse of the national anthem? Is it a matter of any concern to you, or do you think it's caving into identity politics, or are you a supporter?
Look, it's an interesting little thing, isn't it? I mean, I know a few people who are sort of, tossing it off as, oh, it's not that big of a deal, but it actually is. It's quite a big historic thing. I think people aren't kind of giving it the emphasis that it actually deserves. I'm in two minds about it. I mean, my first instinct is that it seems just to me to be a little bit tokenistic. I mean, the issue that a lot of Indigenous people have with the anthem is the song is in its entirety. I mean, we heard Anthony Mundine's comments about it earlier today, but then of course you got Indigenous people like Cathy Freeman, for instance, and also Warren Mundine that you just had a lovely chat to, who were very, very enthusiastic about it, and generally the response seems to be pretty good. So there's obviously an appetite and an acceptance for shifting the words around. But I was thinking about it this afternoon. I think actually we should think bigger when it comes to the anthem, rather than changing, one word which will sort of appease some people but make other people even angrier. How about Australia's grand plan for 2021 could be to hold a national songwriting contest to have an entirely new national anthem. If we really want to go there, why don't we go one step further? It'd be great for the arts industry. You'd get a whole lot of composers and singers who've been out of work. They could come and they could peddle their wares. I mean, we could have heats and semi-finals, and it would be a wonderful community activity to boost public morale that would be entirely socially distanced in a really, really lovely way, I think, to start the year. So, sure, we can change a word here and a word there, but not everybody's going to be happy. I just think that if we want to think big and think creative, why not? I think it could be fun.
Well, Michael, you've been around the culture wars long enough, and I found it dispiriting. The pile-on that started immediately, Anthony Mundine summing that up, and, you know, no sooner will this concession be made than we'll have the Cancel Australia Day movement start. What's your response to it?
I usually agree with 99% of what Daisy says, mainly on the Andrew Bolt show, but do I think we should have a national competition to write a new national anthem? No, I don't think we should. I think there are far more important things to concentrate on. What do I think? Well, Morrison's changed one word. I think the objection of a lot of sensible people is that, you know, with a stroke of the pen, the government can change the national anthem, and people feel there's something improper about that, or it should be a plebiscite or whatever. But it is what it is. He's changed one word. Look, we're not as young as we were when it was written 140 years ago. We were young and free then. We're 140 years older. We're not so young anymore. So, you know, one and free instead of young and free. Am I concerned about it? Not in the slightest. I'm not concerned about it in the slightest. And it reflects perhaps who we are now, more as a nation. What does concern me, Kate, is the fanatics, the extremists like Mundine, who see white supremacists, you know, behind every letterbox. I've always taken my cue in relation to Indigenous issues, or in recent years, from people like Jacinta Price and Warren Mundine. I think they represent the sensible centre of views in relation to Indigenous issues: moderate, sensible, reasonable, rational, and more concerned, as John Howard used to say, about practical reconciliation as opposed to symbols. But in any case, this is a very much...
Both subject, of course, to shocking vilification, which, if it was directed to a Conservative, would end up in front of an administrative tribunal. But...
Well, you know, that leads to another point. I'm wondering why Twitter is allowed to go unregulated in this country. If the Morrison government wants to do something great for this country, you know, enhance those laws in relation to protecting people's freedoms of their reputations in relation to Twitter. It is a roaming, stinking, stenching sewer of vile abuse that in any workplace would be illegal. In any pub, it's illegal. On any radio station, television station, print media, that type of vile abuse is illegal. It's punishable by fines, in some cases by jail. Yet this vile sewer of hatred against, you know, in relation to Indigenous issues, against Jacinta Price, who I find an eminently reasonable, very sensible, bright, brilliant young woman, and by Warren Mundine, who I think is very, very sensible, always has been. The vile abuse the mad left heap on them should be stopped, and the Minister for Communications should do us all a favour in 2021. When he's fixed the ABC, he should move on to regulating Twitter.
No argument here. Daisy, what's the COVID situation like in Queensland? I know we're talking later about the test match moving to Sydney. Hearing anything there about whether Premier Palaszczuk will allow the cricket test to go ahead at the Gabba? What's the discussion north of the border? You've got a couple of cases, I gather, as well, that have managed to cross into Queensland.
That's actually the first I've heard of a couple of cases being able to cross into Queensland. I mean, maybe that's come out in the last hour. I mean, the report this morning from Queensland COVID was that there weren't any cases at all from memory, although I think they might have detected some of the South African strain in quarantine. I hope that's not the case. I'll certainly be checking that. But, you know, regardless...
Stand corrected. No, your version's correct. You're correct.
Oh, thank God. You had me a little bit worried for a second there. Well, that's great. That's great to know then, yes. But with regards to the test, I haven't really heard very much about it. I think they're laying sort of pretty low in it. I think there'd be a real stink if Palaszczuk did what she did a couple of months ago and started letting athletes in, you know, bypassing hotel quarantine, etc., to play a test while other people have to queue for ages at the border and can't see their loved ones, etc. So it might actually be in the best interest of Annastacia Palaszczuk if the test were actually moved to Sydney. But I think what would really be in the best interest of everyone is if these border closures weren't happening. I mean, there's this absolute hysteria in Australia whenever we get a few extra cases a day locally. And what people have forgotten here is that at the beginning of the pandemic in Australia, the goal was only ever suppression. It was only ever to flatten the curve, let's get, you know, and prepare the hospitals, etc., etc. This elimination thing has only been snuck in by premiers like Annastacia Palaszczuk and Daniel Andrews and Mark McGowan, and they haven't even been upfront about it. They're still sort of, you know, dallying with the idea that they're just trying to suppress it, but that's not what they're trying to do. It's like they're trying to one-up each other, and really the only premier who's shown just the most excellent leadership on this is Gladys Berejiklian. She's got this wonderful balance with you know, letting people live their lives as normally as possible, while the government is the one that does the heavy lifting when it comes to contact tracing and naming venues, etc., rather than expecting the general public to do the heavy lifting by allowing their freedoms to be restricted, their businesses to close, and so on. So really, you know, the best interest for everyone, these borders, we've got to stop shutting down the borders every time there's a few extra cases. It's absolutely ridiculous.
And of course, Michael, your border's already slammed shut. You're not on edge for anything worse from the incumbent down there, are you? You're not expecting that he's going to convulse back into any kind of curfew or lockdown?
I don't think so, because the cases are low. But is it a worry? Of course it's a worry. And we just sort of live each day by the number of cases. But the contract tracing here seems to be a lot better than it was 6 months ago or 5 months ago, when we had the disastrous hotel quarantine program that everyone knows about. But anyway, so we're just hoping the best. But Kate, actually, before we go, can I just ask you on a completely unrelated topic, given I love watching your segments on, I love watching your show and I love watching your segments on cricket.
You're very kind.
I don't know whether you agree with me, but is there any way you could use your considerable influence to get Glenn Maxwell in at number 5 in the Test team and Aaron Finch to open? I mean, these selectors...
My influence is waning, mate. I can tell you.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Separate conversation. I'm banned from... Cricket Australia have banned me. The ABC have cancelled me. I'm not a commentator. I don't even have credentials, but I do know a few people I can call. But that's a good call.
Well, I'll tell you what your credential is. You've got an encyclopedic knowledge of cricket history, and that counts for a hell of a lot.
You're very kind.
This notion, Kate, that you're a 2020 player or you're a one-day player, therefore we don't pick you in the Test team, is utter nonsense. You just watch Maxwell's performances. They have been devastating. Okay, it's 2020, we know all that. But God, talk about a player in form. And this whole notion of Finch, you know, he Finch is a 2020 player now or a one-day player. He's not a Test player. It's like we're picking these people who are out of form, who aren't scoring runs, have failed and failed and failed, who at their best are only got, you know, averages in their 30s. What's Justin Langer doing? I mean, guaranteeing Burns was in the team 3 months ago. Give me a break.
I know. No argument here. I've got Ravi Shastri on speed dial. He's more chance of playing for India if I ring him, I reckon, mate. So let's see. Watch this space, but that's a good tip. We've run out of time, you guys. Thank you. Stay safe, and I look forward to chatting to you in the new year. All the best, and thanks for making time today. Happy and healthy 2021.
And to you.
Bless you.
And to you.
Thank you, Catherine, and to you.